Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce myself and then I'll hand over to Alicia to just say a few words about who she is. So I'm Helen Plant. I am a Senior Associate with the Learning and Work Institute. I lead the work there on volunteering and did when it was NIAIDS for many years and was involved in the early stage of the development of the Community Learning Champions Support Programme. And I currently coordinate for Learning and Work a National Advisory Group on Learning and Volunteering. I was also, up until July, the manager of the Oxfordshire Community Learning Mental Health Pilot. So that's me. So my co-host is Alicia Vernon. So do you want to say a few words, Alicia?
Hello everyone. Yeah, I'm Alicia Vernon. I'm currently the Blue Sky Project Coordinator with Derby Adult Learning Services, Learning Service, should I say. And I've done a whole host of different things. One of the foremost things with volunteering was in the voluntary sector. I've also worked for the Skills Funding Agency. I'm also a tutor and have worked as a tutor in community learning for many years in between various different jobs and a whole host of other things. You know, very privileged to be involved in this and to be sharing some of the information and knowledge that we've gained along the way, and hope that it's useful for you all. So thank you for coming and joining us.
Okay, so this is in a way a presentation of two halves. So I'm going to start off by introducing some of the work, some of the background work really around volunteering and community learning, and not exclusively mental health, but I will say a few things about the mental health dimension to the work that's gone on so far, because I think there are some quite distinctive things about the way that volunteering has worked within adult learning, and it's important that we don't forget that. You know, we've got a long memory of how to do this work, and although we have kind of fancy new terms like co-production now, it's not something entirely new. And then Alicia is going to talk about the work that they're doing in Derby. So there's a bit of theory and then hopefully some practical things and there should be something there hopefully that everyone gets something they can take away. It would be obviously helpful to know what kind of audience experience is. So if you've got anything that you want to raise or suggest, or anything from your own experience that feels like, well, that kind of resonates with what I'm hearing, or that feels completely different, then do pop things in the chat. Okay, so I thought it'd be useful just to start with, you know, why do we think that volunteering is so important? And I think certainly the work that we've done over the years in community learning sort of suggests that there is something really important, really powerful about involving, as volunteers, people in supporting other learners who are like them, you know, particularly when we're talking about reaching the most excluded, the most disadvantaged learners, those for whom learning feels like a huge leap. Then having someone there who is not just a role model but a support, a kind of voice of experience, and has the expertise, if you like, of their own experience to bring to the community learning arena, has proved to be an immensely powerful way of helping other learners to engage and to succeed. And not just because of the work that they can do with learners, but because of the work that they can do with providers and managers and those who are developing the services as well. And what I've tried to distill here are some of the really important messages that we've sort of gathered over the years about what having volunteers involved in community learning brings to the table. And this is based on the evaluations of national programmes. It's based on case study research. It's based on much smaller projects and programmes that we've looked at, and sort of distilled, if you like, these sort of main messages. Volunteers, it has been shown, do improve service delivery and contribute to producing better outcomes, and that the impact that volunteers can have with learners extends just beyond supporting their learning. And health and well-being has been identified repeatedly as an area where having volunteers involved can really promote better, wider outcomes for learners, as well as direct outcomes. And the benefits are kind of a ripple effect, really. So you start with the volunteer, which is sort of the pebble in the lake, if you like, and there's an impact on the volunteers of being involved. You know, for them, it can be the start of a journey, which may be a journey to better health and well-being themselves. It may be a journey back to work. It may be a journey into further learning. And there's an impact then for those that they help, for the learners with whom they work. And then there's an impact on the providers. And there's an impact on the sort of way in which services are delivered as a whole. So I think it's really important to stress that sort of multi-level, multi-layered impact that we identify. More recently, I think in particular, adult learning services, as they're trying to work out how they position themselves in the new context of shrinking budgets, devolution and everything else that's happening, have really identified that involving volunteers is one of the ways that they can position themselves locally, because they are able to provide the training and development and support that enables volunteers to be really effective, and those volunteers can be a resource that other services are able to benefit from. To give a for instance is probably quite helpful. I was working with the Adult Education Service in Swindon, who had been working with the volunteers in the Goan community in a learning capacity, but one of the outcomes of that was that they had been able to find a route for health visitors to start working with that community, who had previously been unable to find a way in, through some of the volunteer ESOL groups that the Adult Ed Service was running, volunteer-led ESOL groups. And through that, they were able to work in some of the areas where they identified that there were health and well-being needs within that community. And then I suppose the trendy language, really, the co-production approaches that are being developed, which offer new ways of working with communities. But I think the thing that I'd always want to stress is that co-production in some ways is a kind of jargon for some things that adult learning volunteers have been working at the delivery end, and they've been working at the design at the stages of designing and developing provision for many years, and across that whole range of ways in which volunteers can be involved, we know that it works, and we know that community learning, adult learning, can have a really important role to play. So I'll just pause there, because I've been talking for a bit, and say if there's anything that anyone wants to raise at this stage. Any comments? Or okay, and as I say, this is a very well established route for way of working, to involve volunteers. There are some national programs, national frameworks that are really well established. The Community Learning Champions Initiative was set up in 2009 to provide infrastructure support for volunteering in community learning, and the resources and the support frameworks that were developed are still in use, still available. The website is still supported. Union Learn, of course, have vast experience of working with volunteers, and their union learning reps have a particular strand of experience around supporting workplace wellbeing, which is relevant to this. The WEA, of course, and workplace learning advocates, which again, building on the experience of the Community Learning Champions Network, has tried to take that model of peer volunteers into workplace learning in non-unionised workplaces, and they too have developed a strand of activity which is around supporting wellbeing in the workplace. So those are sort of some of the national structures. And then, adult learning services have been involving volunteers, many of them, for a long, long time as community learning champions and so on. So I think what we've seen perhaps maybe in the last 4 or 5 years has been a push so that volunteering has been much more mainstream within community learning and within adult education services. But nevertheless, it is something that has a long heritage. We've got the recovery colleges now, and Many of those do have links to their adult education services. And then also community learning providers working with and through third sector providers, which have a particular focus on mental health or on working with communities where addressing mental health issues is one of their concerns. We've identified too, I think, some really core principles around doing this work well. And these are not, I would stress, specific to volunteering in learning. You know, these are, if you like, the fruits of the experience of what we know around volunteer involvement from across sectors, and particularly around involving what we call peer volunteers. This is the someone like me, the someone to sit alongside kind of volunteer. And fundamental, I think, to doing it well is to understand that this is a reciprocal relationship, and that volunteers bring something and the host organisation brings something, and recognising the value of what each side contributes is fundamental to building a positive relationship. The second point, maybe one that isn't quite so well recognised outside of our sector, but I think it's one that we'd really want to stress, is that volunteering is a learning opportunity. You know, volunteering is learning. If it's done well, it should be. And in fact, one of the ways in which volunteering can be rewarded is through that development support, and ensuring that for volunteers it is a really positive experience where they come away having kind of grown and developed themselves. Volunteering isn't free is kind of a mantra, I think, and we would all recognise that. And point 4, I think, feels particularly sensitive and important now, and part of that really is recognising that volunteers bring something different. It's not just about getting people to do things for free. It is about valuing a different kind of expertise, and it's the expertise of experience, and that is distinct really from what you as an organisation aim to get when you employ someone. Equality and diversity and inclusion should be, of course, central to any volunteering initiative, and recognition and celebration of what volunteers bring, which sort of links back really to the idea of reciprocity, and that this is a relationship which should be based on a kind of mutual respect and understanding of what volunteers bring. I put that slide in really just because it's a helpful way of thinking about the stages that volunteer involving organisations need to think about when you're trying to establish a programme. So that'll be familiar to anyone who's already working with volunteers, I think. And this is just sort of a number of questions that I think it can be helpful to pose to really understand and get to the crux of why volunteers are or can be a sort of a beneficial dimension of the work in community learning, but also to sort of help to think through what a volunteer programme might look like, and what the essential components might be. And I think experience of sort of running this kind of workshop or webinar in the past is that there is a lot of interest in particular in the sort of training and development and support, and I think we'll hear more from Alicia about what they're doing in Derby around that. But you know, a sort of a kind of an interest among organisations that are working with volunteers in our sector to think about, you know, how far they want to support volunteers with their training, and, you know, whether accredited training is appropriate, and if so, what accredited training. And those are the kinds of discussions that that we often have around this, because I think it is recognised, because I think particularly in our sector we're very attuned to the idea that it should be a learning opportunity for volunteers, and therefore identifying how, as organisations working with volunteers, are going to support their development is critical. Okay, so do you want me to hand over to you now, Alicia, or have we got any questions? I can't see if anything's popped up in the chat. Let's have a look. Okay, no, all right there at the moment, so we can, over to you, Alicia.
Lovely. Well, thank you. Really, thank you, Helen, because everything that you were saying there echoes really strongly and resonates with everything that has been a practice of mine since I was doing volunteer programs in the voluntary sector, and could see that the huge impact, and allowing the volunteers there to say to me, okay, so we can draw other women in by doing some mending and doing some artwork and things. So, okay, we'll set that program up. So kind of at the heart of community learning, even in the voluntary sector as well, you've got all of that. And then, of course, moving into community learning, and where I've been in and out of for many years, as I said in the introduction, seeing the true value of volunteering in community learning. And you're absolutely right about it being a learning experience, and that it should be recognised, and that it is recognised and it is accredited these days, which is fantastic. So straight back into the Blue Sky project and working with our volunteers. And so you can see at the top of this slide where we're talking about our aim, and this is just a general philosophy that we have in community learning in Derby Adult Learning Centre, is our aim is for you to meet new people, enjoy your learning experience, gain confidence and go on to further success. And that's equally as true for volunteers, for learners, and even sometimes for staff and tutors, which I am one as well. So it's a very kind of holistic approach that's suitable for everybody in there, and extremely beneficial, I've found. So courses for people experiencing mental ill health in community learning context. So there are challenges, but in terms of the challenges such as using the right language and the right approach for volunteers, in my experience right the way through, I often have found that volunteering is a pool of people that come in with a wealth of lived experience, whether that be with various different things that they're facing, maybe mental ill health, maybe just general life experiences that maybe have stripped the confidence out of them. And it's a really lovely easing into the world of work, and somewhere where you do find that people come in and they build their confidence, but they give so much more to you as well. So it's in what we did in Derby, initially with the Blue Sky, prior to Blue Sky actually, because we'd already started this work, was go make links with all the different organisations and the hospitals and various places, because we were having that as part of our provision anyway, and because it's inclusive. So, and for many years we've done that in community learning. If I think back as far as I can, probably, when did I start? I'd say about 15 years ago. So, and it goes far beyond that. We were not the only ones. So, using our pool of paid support workers and learning partners who are volunteers. So we have mainstream a really great programme that pre-existed Blue Sky, where people could go in and they could buddy up with someone, and they could both do a course free. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. So it's, you know, it's a usual thing to happen, and for volunteers to be valued and respected, and for us to really listen to them and get their knowledge and experience too. So supporting workers as a tutor, recording the support, and managing their communication with their manager. And this is something that is really important that I found as a tutor, when I've had volunteers in the class, that, you know, sometimes things happen in a classroom setting, and it's you see that look on them where they're thinking, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing here. And it's important to take time out with them and kind of cross-check, how did that work for you? Is everything okay? What are the crunch points? So when we would get a moment and people would go off, if I saw that kind of glazed look, we'd sit down with a cup of coffee or tea and just talk it through while everybody else is having their break, and how did it go. So it's a very gentle approach, I think, but it's really important that you value them and take that time out with them. And you get so much more from a volunteer, and they stay with you, and then they develop and grow and learn, because that's part of what you're encouraging and supporting with them. And it's an absolute thrill. You know, there's nothing better than seeing a person develop, as I'm sure many people know. I'm probably preaching to the converted here. So is there anything that anybody would like to ask about that monologue? Okay, so there's a little comment here. So interestingly, seem to think that Lisa dances. Is this for me to read out, Helen, or is it for you to read out, Helen?
Oh,
no, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly, I seem to think that Lisa Dancer at Hillingdon site, which is a Group C in Year 2, is looking at using something very similar to your buddying example, Alicia. You might want to make contact with her and share the experience. Yes. Yes, I'd be more than happy to do that. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So hopefully will be some reciprocal use there, which is great, again, across sharing.
Could you just say, Alicia, something about using the right language and right approach? What
did I mean? Yeah. Yes. I did kind of scoot off that, didn't I? Because I got these beautiful images of how I do that, and it actually didn't articulate it. So thank you. Yeah, I think bearing in mind that when people come through on volunteering, sometimes it's part of their healing process. Sometimes it is part of them gathering skills to go on and do something, or to put it on a CV for whatever reason. I found that if I use language that is too that sounds too posh, that in, that is a language that people aren't using particularly, it can really isolate people. So you have to be really careful that you be prepared to own the fact with your people that you're working with, that sometimes you may say things that they don't understand, and give them permission to bring you back down to earth. Because that's what I will say. I will say, you know, if there's ever anything that I say and it just sounds like, you think, what? Just say to me, Alicia, what are you saying? Because it's really easy to slip into jargon. And what the worst thing that I found to do is to give people that confusion. Because I know that I can get easily confused, very easily confused. Just because I know something doesn't mean that I have the right to kind of say that without checking out with somebody else how they're doing, how have they understood that, and in a non-patronising way. That's also another skill, because you can say, oh, did you understand that? And it just sounds like that you think that they're not clever enough. So there's a real balance. And also, we've got so many different communities, haven't we? I mean, back in the day before I did the community learning in adult learning, working with Asian women, there's a whole way that you use language and that you understand their world that's really important to you. So it's useful to do a bit of talking with other people that have worked in that area. If you're working with a certain pool of volunteers, that you make sure that you really do take advice from other people that maybe have worked in that community for a long time, not to be afraid of that. Working with young people is a whole nother ballgame, because they do have their kind of own language, and I've invited young people to teach me some of that language as a way of breaking down the barriers. You've got to be really flexible, and I have to tell you that some of the things they taught me I cannot repeat here, but it was very interesting, and they loved the fact that I didn't quite get their world, and I was a bit shocked by what they were saying, but that's playtime, you see, and it's so important to have that kind of playtime. And I think maybe for all of us, but particularly with young people, and as a vehicle to kind of accept the fact that are maybe not as technologically savvy as they are, and say, you know, to elicit their help. So, you know, different groups have different languages, and just to be aware of that. And if you feel out of your depth, it's okay just to say that. You know, it's fine, because that actually kind of endears people to you, and it's honest. And I think there's nothing better than just admitting it, really, and just being human, because we all have that experience. So it's enjoy the experience, rise to the challenge, admit who you are, and seek the help where you need it, and just embrace it, because it's such great fun working with volunteers across the spectrum. Does that answer it?
Yeah, lovely. Do you want me to move us on?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Now it's refusing to move. Why is my slide not moving?
Lovely. Okay, so here we go. This is the Learning Partner Scheme that I spoke about. So within our main provision, and it's something that we as Blue Sky are joining up with, because up until this year, our Blue Sky volunteers were kind of very specifically targeted around the kind of recovery, and we've had a lot of volunteers come in through that route. So now I've got a community learning them up a bit more, because I'm in Group C. So I'm partnering up with our lovely manager, who actually manages the learning partner side of things. And she's having a bit of a learning curve, and so am I, because we're going to actually kind of mainstream things a little bit more. And so learning partners is something that, say, for example, we've got somebody's interested in doing a pottery course. And we've got a volunteer, a learning partner, who's registered, this is in the mainstream programme, who has said that they want to kind of buddy up and just support somebody and be a friend to them. And they've had our training, and which we'll move on to in a bit. So it's kind of the general training that we provide for everyone. So they've had the training, and they've also identified that actually they'd like to support someone who wants to attend that pottery making course. So our manager would hook those two people up. If they got on together, then that would become their friend throughout the course. And although the learning partner has those skills and awareness, they are kind of very similar kind of level. They're matched to be that and to be a friend. That's the way that, you know, the way that it's designed to be that friend and support. So somebody doesn't go into the class feeling, oh gosh, this is massive, you know, it's too big for me. So if you think about it, the mental health side has been being covered for many, many, many years, because we understand human behaviour, and I think that is part of it. So it makes it a very, very accessible environment, we hope, and that's what has been borne out by the success of community learning. So the learning partners also, they are volunteers. They come in and they don't get paid for that work, but they do go on the course for free. And for as long as they are with us, they go on these leisure courses or any other course that they're buddying up with someone for free. And sometimes that's quite a cost saving. But for the person who wants to access as well, so they both get it for free. So it's a way of supporting people who maybe wouldn't access courses on their own. And it's a very successful scheme, and we use it a lot. So that's something that we do, and which we will be, you know, the Blue Sky volunteers will be introduced to this, because also we have, in the same very similar vein, we have paid support workers that have come through the Learning Partners scheme. So there's been a progression there. So one of the progression routes for our volunteers, when Blue Sky, comes to its conclusion, will be that they'll be hooked into the mainstream provision and may have progression there.
Yeah.
So if we could move to the next slide, that would be great. So in terms of how we train our volunteers, last year when it was, when we were looking at a more kind of medical model, if you like, for want of a better word, we got our volunteers trained with, just have to have a look at I seem to have a mental block with the word rethink, and I don't know why, but we did buddy up with Rethink, and they delivered, a woman called Rebecca, a lovely woman, she delivered for us on that side. And then, of course, there was training days, and with Blue Sky itself, with the manager that was there at the time, Matt. So we kind of did it from that angle. Well, this year, there's the process. So there's a reference form to fill in if they'd already worked with us, various checks, the various different forms. There's also a training needs analysis, which identifies kind of what they have done and what they need training on, and so that we can properly evaluate where they're at and what they need to be doing. And a DBS check, because of course you wouldn't be able to work with our groups, and that is just mainstream as well. That's just a standard check because we have vulnerable adults. So and it's important work that our volunteers do. And again, I think doing all these checks and having all this documentation, giving them safeguarding training, and the peer support training, doing all of this there's a time investment from us, but also gets people thinking, this is good, I'm being taken seriously, and that's echoed through. People feel, right, I'm involved in something that, where I can make a contribution and where I'm being upskilled in this. So it's while we can get bogged down with paperwork, there is also a benefit for it, and kind of important to record that for distance travelled as much as anything else. But we also, now that we're coming out of kind of the more medical side and back into the kind of community learning side of things, we have fantastic opportunities in the community already that we do tap into. One of our volunteers is already doing his volunteer passport with Derby County Council, an excellent programme. And then we've got Community Action Derby, where our pool of volunteers are having a training day very soon. And so all of the volunteers, Blue Sky and our usual community learning volunteers, will be invited to. So, these are invigorating, and they are important. And in fact, I'm even thinking booking on to the one with Community Action just to see what goes on in there as well, because I haven't been involved in that end for a long time, just delivering and doing what we do and recommending on. So I think it'd be quite good practice, actually. And also get to spend a bit of time with them. So I'm seriously considering that. Okay, so how do we induct, train and support Blue Sky volunteers? So last year, what happened was, as well as all of the forms and things like that, they would have the sessions, the training sessions. And I think there were a lot of discrete conversations that went on. I know that there was a lot of very accessible support, immediate support, if you like, via the phone. Kind of informal, we'll catch you, how are things going, what's happening there. Slightly maybe different approach to the one that I would have, which would be that, but also I'm going to kind of get with everyone, one by one. I'm having one-to-ones with everyone. So what worked well for you last year? How did that go? And I really want to kind of, I've picked up that what's happened with the volunteers in year one, and I don't know if that's the people's experience, but they tended to go to a session and be part of the group. And I know when I was teaching there as well, volunteers would come along and they would be part of the group. And actually, as I'm reflecting back on that, it's not such a bad thing because they were taking it all in. So this year, knowing that, I want to say, okay, so which little bits of that did you like? What did you feel that you really wanted to get involved in and thought, do you know, I could do that? So I kind of want to give voice to what was going on inside their heads in those one-to-ones and see what they'd like to do. And I've had some of those conversations already. I'm going to be having more. And also getting them involved in training again regarding the volunteering, which we're doing, because everything would have been so new for them last year. They were brand new to adult and community learning as well. And I think it's really useful to have that ongoing training element. And then finally, in this little bullet point, I've got thinking environment training and neurodiversity. Now, this is something that personally I find very exciting. And it's been part of our training. And I feel selfish keeping it all to myself. So introduced in Barnsley to, it might have been before then actually, to Lou Mycroft and the thinking environment and also neurodiversity. I think because part of my background, I'd learned about CBT and cognitive behaviour therapy and that type of counselling, and that's part of my kind of history. So I think this is far more kind of thinking environment and neurodiversity seems far more holistic. Again, I know I've used that word before, and I think it's very, very, very good for equality and diversity, and as a living kind of practice, it's encompassing. And I really, really like that because I always wanted to add bits into cognitive behavioural therapy. I always wanted to, you know, kind of give it all the elements and give it all the bells and whistles and community it up and all of those things. So I think for me, thinking environment, neurodiversity is new learning for me as well. So we're going to be having that training for our volunteers and for a few senior managers, and I've already purchased some books. This is a little surprise I've got for people, so if they actually watch this they're going to know the surprise. So I don't know if I'm allowed to show the book that I've got, as it's because it'd be advertising. Is that okay to show the book? Okay, so can anybody, I need to share my screen, don't I? Can people see it on there? How do I do that? Yeah. Okay. So it's that. And I'm having time off at week beginning the 24th, and I've actually brought it home for leisure reading, and that's good for me because I'm dyslexic. So, right. So, if we could move on to the next slide. Impact and value of involving volunteers. So volunteers have the ability to invigorate and challenge a project, and I think that's quite important for me. It's really, really easy to become staid and to become afraid of challenge, and I'm one of those that can be a bit afraid of challenge. But also I think there's a really healthy way to accept challenge and to listen to people that are saying to you, well, actually, that didn't work for me, and you did that in the wrong way, and, you know, and what's that about? And I didn't understand that. To actually take it on board, and rather than say, oh, well, you know, you weren't listening properly. And I think some people can get really defensive. So we need to just drop that. And having volunteers makes you take a step back and go, okay, right, so what do I need to do? What do I need to change? And I think to be open to that kind of thing and to not see it as a threat, it's a learning curve. And your volunteers will teach you that actually they're not out for you. It's okay to really look at what it is they need, because when we meet their needs, we're meeting the needs of the community. And I think that's quite important to do. So they share a wealth of knowledge, and it kind of echoes what Helen said as well. It's both ways. You know, we never stop learning if we're open, do we? and the things that even now working with Blue Sky again, and because going from being a tutor last year and kind of working with the volunteers in a classroom setting and kind of just letting them be, and now as a coordinator working with them, listening, because they tell you a bit more when you're in that role. You have the one-to-ones, they tell you just a little bit more. So listening to some of their background, because they want to share that story then. And it brings you back to, you know, your roots. And you can see the inspiring journey that they're taking. And sometimes it reminds you of the journey that you've taken. And, you know, it gives you kind of thankfulness. So there's many, many benefits. And of course, the younger ones as well are bringing something about today's community with them. And our older ones bring in some of the frustrations of living in today with them. So you begin to get a lot more information and a better feel for what's happening out there instead of being quite insular, which is easy to become quite insular. Acting as an enabler for anybody to aspire to, and Helen mentioned that as well. So, you know, well, they did that, I could do that. It's a really simple equation, actually, you know. Sharing and releasing diversity. I suppose I do use flowery words sometimes, but releasing diversity in a sense is you don't know what's coming through that door, or, you know, the background that somebody's got, what they're bringing. And when you get somebody new, whatever their makeup, we have to find a way to support that. And some people will just release themselves into your organisation, and every person needs to be valued and appreciated. And when you find how it is that they need that, you start to see a development. So, you know, it's just really exciting. Keeping a project's review process alive to ensure relevance and capacity to support and train. You know, I think there are times where we've set something up, it's worked for years and years and years, and then you look at it again, which is what's happening now that we're partnering up with the learning partners. They've had established processes for years and years and years. The Blue Sky has got maybe different ways of doing things, and maybe it's going to bring something else into that learning partners. So it's, in a sense, being open to change and being open to working across the board with Blue Sky and with mainstream is helping to keep the process more relevant. Of how we recruit, how we support, and look at maybe ways that we do have the capacity to properly support and train, and where we haven't, we're kind of recommending or bringing people in. So there's a partnership working going on. So we recognising other agencies' contribution, and that's very healthy. So at this point, I think we can move on to the next screen. Unless there's anything anybody wants to ask about that, because the next screen, I do believe, is going to be what a few of them, the results of things that have actually happened. So is there anything that anybody wants to ask at this point?
Just have a look in the chat. I think you're all right to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, right. Just a little bit more about what we're doing, I think, then. Is this? Yes. So review and achievement of goals and progression in one-to-one. And that's something that I've started that process. So, you know, as I said before, asking the question, how has it gone, and what do you want to get out of it? Have they managed to achieve what they wanted? And I think there's a kind of a felt sense that people really wanted to do a lot more, but that they, I think that they were absorbing things so much, as I said before, but now I feel that people are really ready to get on and do a little bit more. So in the one-to-ones, kind of identifying some goals and things that they can move on to do. And I think for a lot of people, the part of the achievement is actually getting there on time. Being in the groups and finding out about the structure and how the learning works and those types of things. So there was achievement of a kind of in a much softer way. So now we're going to kind of be bringing it a little bit more. We're going to be pushing people a little bit more, I think, this time. But that said, as you will see, there have been some fantastic achievements and progress that have come out of year one as well. Okay, so gathering feedback from tutors and the volunteers. Let's have a little look. So that's something that, again, is happening kind of in one-to-one conversations, and something that I'm aware that I need to do, because when I talk to the tutors, I know that I will get a different layer of information about how the volunteers have operated and how they've done, and what the tutors maybe see as gaps and where they might best be placed. And I have had that conversation with a few of the tutors, and I will be having more. So just 1 second, I just need to quickly read through something. Okay, so courses enrolled on to progress new learning, which we're going to see some of that on the next slide. It's very exciting for me to see volunteers being progressed in that way. And jobs obtained. That's something that that's something that I have seen previously, and that's something that I am hoping will be the outcome for some of our volunteers who up to now have not been in employment. So that will be, you know, I have seen that before when I was many years ago when I was working and developing volunteers in a community setting, where one of our volunteers went on to work for the local council, and yeah, that was really exciting and very capable and a very, very, very worthwhile. Progression data is collected by our service for learners, which may also include volunteers. So with our systems at MIS, with MIS, some of that information about volunteers when post Blue Sky, if they've gone on to courses or gone on to other learning within the service, we'll be able to pick that information up. But I also will be, I will be in touch with people, and I will find out how they're doing. You know, it's a simple conversation. I have enough links in the community to be able to say, oh, how's this person doing? How's that person? What's happening with them? So some of that, what happens post Blue Sky, you know, it's my intention, and I'm sure theirs, for them to be firmly hooked into something that is going to help develop them further. So we will keep a track on that. I think it's really important, and as well to the legacy of this research. I mean, I keep talking about Blue Sky because that's what I'm so used to hearing, but the legacy of this research to capacity build people, which I think is so valuable, and a unique opportunity as well to do things differently and to upskill people and ourselves. So it's very exciting times, actually. So if we move on to the next slide. Okay. So here are some of the progression examples, and it's not everything by all means, because I can't remember everything, and I thought the list would be too long. So this is as a result of year one, phase one. So we've had one of our volunteers who's actually gone on to do level 4 teaching qualification. That's something that he's paid for himself. He's secured a grant to do that. And we've had another that we've paid for to do level 3 qualification out of Blue Sky. So, and very, very excited to be doing so. Both of them is something that they've identified as a result of doing the course. Completing volunteer passport. Now, this is in the process of being completed, and this is one being taken through Derby County Council. We've got the link on this set of slides as well. I think I've got it actually on the page further up, and so you'll be able to find that on this slide as well. You'll just do a simple search in Google, volunteer passport, Derby County Council. It's a very good programme, comes highly recommended. I've been told it's excellent. So, and then another one of the people, volunteers, has kind of been involved in the classroom sessions, and maybe actually genuinely just found that taking a kind of a more leadership, contributing part in the classrooms wasn't quite so much the thing that pressed the buttons, but social media, yes. And so I'm now thinking, right, okay, get involved with our Twitter then. Let's get him involved with, let's see if we can do a Facebook. We've got certain restrictions in being a city council. But what can we do that we can get him involved? And what courses are there that we can help him get involved in to help him develop and move on in? And if he chooses, then I think he still wants to kind of be involved in a classroom setting. So how would he like to be involved? So we're looking at that, and it's interesting. So we've had another one that started an independent creative writing group. So we did some creative writing in the course, and very, very interesting. And so we've had people as well that would like to take a more active role in contributing to facilitating in the classroom. So some that are kind of coming through very strongly as, yeah, well, I'd like to get involved in doing that part a bit more, and, saying, how we can develop this session plan. So I've had tutors working alongside of doing that bit a little bit more. But also bearing in mind that they are not as an alternative to paid staff. Very important. This is our supporting role. This is our facilitating role. And, what they give to us is their time, their expertise in their field. And so, we're not there to use them. We're there to appreciate them. So offered to take, and just a nice simple one. One of our volunteers the other day said, let's come to the, do you want to come to the temple? I said, well, if you're up for it, absolutely. Shall we invite everyone? Oh, yeah. And so we have this conversation about Diwali and, going to the temple, and any other ideas that people have got, we're going to be open to it. So it's very rich. And, it's, I think, kind of an essential part of what we do with our volunteers and enjoying them. So,
yeah, we got a couple of comments in the chat, really, yes. Alicia, which it might just be worth flagging up at this point. Just saying how welcome it was to hear about, first of all, the kind of stretch, the sort of the idea of actually being quite demanding of what you expect from people, and sort of challenging them to test themselves and to extend themselves and to push themselves, because that's how people grow and develop, really, isn't it? So, and that we maybe don't hear enough about the importance of that. And then, I think I've always sort of thought it's great, the idea of starting from where the learner is, but you don't want to leave them there. You really want to kind of get them as far on as you can. And then secondly, a sort of welcoming as well of the idea that you kind of really invite challenge to what you do, and that perhaps as a sector we're not as good as we could be at welcoming it when people turn around and tell us that things aren't working for them. And we need to listen to them better to understand what might work. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that. And I certainly think that, you know, I certainly think that there's a lot to be gained and a lot to give and a lot to receive. So, you know, it works on all levels being with volunteers. It's a great thing to do. So get involved and embrace it. And thank you so much for contributions. Really appreciate the comments.
Okay. Are we, oops, let's see, I've clicked off, I think. Okay, that's okay. Sorry, did you have anything more to say on that slide?
No, it seems to have come to a really nice conclusion itself, and thank you everyone for sticking with me and all of my many words.
Yeah. But I think that was a really immensely helpful sort of insight into what it's like to actually be inside one of these projects working with volunteers, and also I think really usefully connecting to the wider work that's going on in the kind of mainstream, if you like, service, and that being both a source of experience and expertise that you can draw on, but also potentially start of a progression route for people. And I think the sort of thinking about what's distinctive about the mental health context was very helpful. I mean, the Community Learning Champions programme that, as I say, has been running for a long time, there've been a number of local schemes in that have just quite naturally evolved to have a focus on health and well-being, mental health and well-being, over the years. But I think what the research project as well enables us to do is to really sort of explore a lot more forensically what the detail might be of how you support learners in that situation better. But I think to understand how volunteering can be part of that package, and particularly if you're taking the challenging approach of working with volunteers who themselves have some experience of mental health difficulties, and that they can bring those insights into the classroom, into the learning environment, but that that puts particular responsibilities as an organisation on the service or the host organisation that's working with them. So there's quite a lot there.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks,
Helen, you've just reminded me of one more thing that I think it's really important to say. So if that's okay, is that before Blue Sky, I worked with many volunteers who did have mental health problems for many years. So it's not a new thing at all. It's something that we do and we're very good at in community learning.
Yeah, and I think what the research project will help us to do is to kind of shine a spotlight on some of the detail, to expose a little bit more just how you do it and how you do it well. Okay, so I think we're reaching a conclusion. So on this final slide, there are a few links to things that might be useful for anyone who wants to follow up further with any of the things that we've heard today. A little while ago, Katina and I ran a webinar just for the mental health pilots, and I've pulled together as part of that a range of resources around volunteering and volunteering in mental health, and they're all collected together on the MHFE website as a box set, so that link's there. A link to the Blue Sky project for to go and find out a bit more about that and what they're doing in Derby, and obviously that's up there with the other mental health research projects. As I mentioned at the start, there are a lot of materials that were produced for the Community Learning Champions National Support Programme, which are still relevant, so they can be accessed there. And also a range of resources on working with volunteers in community learning have been pulled together for the Community Learning Reform website. And then finally, I've included this Investing in Volunteers framework. It's a kind of akin to Investors in People's, but obviously rather for volunteer support and development rather than staff support and development. The reason I included that was because when we did the mental health and community learning webinar, that was highlighted by one of the projects as a framework that they'd found really helpful for getting to grips with their volunteering. And I think the feedback on it is if you're if you're very well established at working with volunteers, it's a useful checklist. And if you're quite new to it, it's a really helpful framework for enabling you to think through everything that needs to happen. And it was produced by NCVO, I think. Okay, I think that's all. So I'm not quite sure what happens next. Katina, how do we sign off? Okay. Do I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you want to stop sharing. And I just want to say thank you very much indeed to both of you. It was really, really interesting, and some, you know, great useful comments in the chat. One of the things I was doing while you were talking was actually sending emails to people to say, oh, you want to listen to the recording of this because I've been talking to you about this recently, or you've told me about X. So I think you should expect your inboxes to be
good. That's fine. That's fine.
I'm just going to stop the record button now, and then I'll put the recording up later, and we will send the link to you, and we'll add it to the box set, Helen, so that it's
lovely
on the box set. And then at the end of the webinars in October, we are going to put all of the recordings into a box set that will be on the homepage of the Equalities Toolkit MHFE website. So hopefully there'll be resources that, you know, have a bit of a life, if you like. So thank you both very much indeed. Really, really interesting. And thank you for getting up so early. I hope
that's all right.
Breakfast lined up some for when you come off camera.
I noticed as well that there's a webinar coming up on co-production, isn't there? Which yes. I was thinking if I'm around, I will try and come into that one. But that would be a useful one to sit alongside this. I think.
No,
see what their take
one
on
this
it.
afternoon on safeguarding as well. Or I think I better get that phone call. So I'm going
Okay.